West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The President's newly passed COVID relief package aims to correcting a historic wrong, allocating $5 billion with a B dollars in aid to the nation's black farmers, who have seen nearly all of their farmland lost over the last century, having been largely shut out of federal programs that benefited their white peers. But rather than view their aid as helping a historically disenfranchised group, Republicans have, of course, called it racist and tagged it with that other R word, reparations. Joining me now, John Boyd Jr., founder and president of the National Black Farmers Association. Mr. Boyd, as you just read from my intro, I want to reiterate that since 1910, black farmers have lost 90% of their land, some 12 million acres, largely due to systematic racism. For our viewers, what does that discrimination look like, specifically where banking and access to federal aid are concerned? You and I have talked about this for years. You've been on the forefront of it. Explain what has happened historically and why this means something.
Well, Reverend Sharpton, thank you for having me. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for helping me with the Claims Remedy Act of 2010 that helped nearly 20,000 black farmers receive their settlement from the United States Department of Agriculture. But what this new measure does is it rectifies a wrong for black and other farmers of color. We've been totally shut out of the U.S. Farm Subsidy Program, U.S. Farm lending at the United States Department of Agriculture, farm rural development loans. We've been totally shut out. And under the last administration, Reverend Sharpton, they told out $29 billion to primarily white farmers in this country, where black farmers didn't participate at all. And when we put this bill in a part of the COVID relief bill, 10 senators sponsored amendments to pull our language out. And Senator Lindsey Graham, who was a very outspoken critic, said it really bothered him that we were a part of the spending bill. So we've been having an uphill battle for decades, and we've been fighting this fight for a very, very long time, and now it's the time to change it. And right now, Reverend Sharpton, for the first time in history, we have a black in the Ag Committee, Chairman Scott. We have 2 blacks on the Senate Agriculture Committee, Senator Warnock and Senator Booker. And we have a president and vice president that certainly want to help and receptive to helping our nation's black farmers.
Now, let me go back to what you said, because as expected, the assistance to black farmers contained in the president's relief package has been attacked as racially discriminatory, perhaps the most vocal detractor being, as you mentioned, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who has called the aid reparations. Just listen to this.
In this bill, if you're a farmer, your loan will be forgiven up to 120% of your loan, not 100%, but 120% of your loan if you're socially disadvantaged, if you're African American, some other minority. But if you're white person, if you're a white woman, no forgiveness as reparations.
Now, clearly he has no problem with or interest in fixing the systemic discrimination that black farmers have faced for decades. But that's to be expected. What are your thoughts on the senator's complaints, though, Mr. Boyd?
Well, I'll tell you, Reverend Sharpton, I lobbied Senator Lindsey Graham as a congressman. I lobbied him as a senator. I've been by his office and asked him to help me fix the problems at the United States Department of Agriculture that caused black farmers to lose millions of acres of land and address the lack of loans and subsidies. And he's never once used his megaphone to speak out against the discrimination. But as soon as we get justice here some 30 years later, his very first words, he said he found it troubling. And in his last part of his statement, he said, well, we need to check them. He should have been checking us when we came by his office to ask him to help fix the problems at the United States Department of Agriculture. He should have been checking us when we were sharecroppers and survived by Jim Crow. Members of Congress like Senator Lindsey Graham should have been checking us. So I find his comments racist, and we're calling on him. The National Black Farmers Association is calling for him to apologize, Senator Lindsey Graham, and we're making that announcement on your show. He needs to apologize not only to black farmers, but to black people in this country who struggled for so very, very long, and now we get a chance for a little bit of justice. And he uses his megaphone to play this race type thing when he knows firsthand that black farmers have suffered. When he has 6,000 black farmers in his state, and he won't help us, but he uses his megaphone to try to deny payment from black farmers.
You know, a century ago, there were 1 million black farmers. Now there are fewer than 50,000. According to the Department of Agriculture, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says he's aware of the disparity and wants to grow more farmers of color. Apart from this relief package, where should he start?
He should start, just like you said, immediately to get the debt relief out to the thousands of black farmers that desperately need it right now. And I spoke to Secretary Vilsack yesterday and urged him to hurry up and put in place the commission and to get the debt relief to not just black farmers, but farmers of color, Native American farmers, Hispanic farmers, and other socially disadvantaged farmers. He can't be the same Secretary Vilsack he was under the Obama years. He's going to have to take a more aggressive approach to help fix the culture, the discriminating culture, Reverend Sharpton, because nobody has been fired for the act of discrimination, for discriminating against me and thousands of other black farmers. Yeah. The only one I know that was fired was Shirley Sherrod. She was fired the next day. We need accountability for those people who were found guilty of discriminating. Some heads need to roll so that people know that this can't be the same old United States Department of Agriculture. And Secretary Vilsack needs to make a quick announcement that USDA is open for business for blacks and other minority farmers.
It is Monday, the 15th of March of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because it's not only the Ides of March, but it's been, well, a weekend, and, what is left over from that weekend, as you know, gets sliced and diced and reconstituted into a lovely gourmet dish for your gourmet delight. Ooh. Well, how many days has it been now since Joe Biden hasn't given a press conference? Gosh, the White House press corps is all a titter over Joe Biden apparently not meeting with them. Even though there's a press conference every day with the press secretary. But that's not good enough. They got to have Joe out there so they can ask him inane questions like, are you going to kill your dog? You going to take it to the pound and have your dog killed? And if they're not going to ask about that, they're going to ask about the crisis at the border. And what crisis is that? Well, what the actual crisis is a short-term problem, and that's just getting enough housing and, well, beds and shelter for the influx of all these kids and other immigrants trying to apply for residency or even just asylum. Just asylum. And the crisis is just having enough facilities, infrastructure, to be able to process these people. But we know how the White House press corps is thinking. Yeah, wait a second. Are you saying there's a bunch of brown people coming over the border and you're not doing what we want you to do? And that's, I don't know, lock them up in icebox baby gulags instead? If he starts locking them up in icebox baby gulags, they're going to, then they, being the White House press corps, will start insisting that all of it started, if not with Obama, then with Joe. Completely forgetting how the whole immigration system was weaponized by Donald Trump. So I guess it's because Donald Trump was a much more exciting figure. You know, all those weekends that we had for the last 4 years where it was just not a restful weekend. It was not a period of time for rest. We didn't get any rest for 4 years. And now the White House press corps, I guess, still wants us to lose some sleep. I like competence better. You know, apparently competence is boring. When you're competent, you're a loser. Yeah. All right. Well, you know, the Cuomo story is another big one. Isn't it weird how we always take our harassers and creeps to task? And I'm not, you know, Cuomo is a bully, and everybody knows that. It's how he's worked. It's not just because he's a New Yorker. He's an actual bully. And I don't doubt any of the accusations that have been leveled against him. But I'll be damned if they're trying to get him out so they can install some sort of Republican in there and give Trump a pardon. You know that's what it is. Because every time, and this is no apology for Cuomo, but every time I hear about Cuomo now, I think about Trump publicly insisting that his raison d'etre is that he has dirt on everyone and he will exact revenge 10 times what he got. So all this dirt and BS that's now being released about Cuomo sure smells like a Trump operation to me. Yep, it's called compromat. And where would Trump be getting all that compromat? You know, he didn't just have the ability to do it all those decades when he was a private businessman, because he's been in bed with the Russians since before they stopped being the Soviet Union. There's already been a dossier written up on him from the first time, like when he went over and, well, when he married Ivana. Let's remember that Ivana's dad was KGB. We all talked about it back in the day, and now it's come to fruition. This whole time, all of our suspicions about him being a Russian agent sure looks to be true. I know we have to hedge our bets a little bit to be, I don't know, objective. But the only objective analysis throughout it all is that he has been in bed with the Russians and he owes them big time. I mean, why deny the obvious? So this BS about Cuomo, and he needs to resign. But not at the expense of installing some Trump acolyte to pardon Trump. It's BS. No. All right. And there's plenty, you know, the lieutenant governor, for instance, seems to be a pretty good person to be able to fulfill this role of governor. And she might even win an election to maintain that position. But yeah, let's not go through the New York caucus, because this is another thing. No Republican will ever win in New York. They have to call themselves Democrats. That's why you also have to really look hard about who you think is a Democrat in that state. Okay? We might have a little bit more difficulty discerning it here on the outside, but a lot of New Yorkers know exactly who they are. Okay. All right. Hey, the Grammys were on last night, and you know what? Back in the day when it was at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, now they did it at the Staples Center, and they had it outside and socially distanced, and it was great. I loved it. But when we were little kids, grade school, junior high, Mom and my great aunt, my Aunt Billy, my late uncle was a stuntman in Hollywood, so we used to go to all of the events when I was a little kid, get dressed up in my little kid tuxedo. I had one of those. Yeah, my Aunt Billy and my Aunt Fern would take me to the Brown Derby. Remember the Brown Derby? Yeah, I was just a little guy in this little monkey suit, but they were teaching me etiquette and, like what it was like to be in Hollywood. So we used to go to the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium all the time when the Grammys were there. It was fun. And so my mom, my soon-to-be 84-year-old mom, was totally entranced by the Grammys last night, and she just gushed about that was the best Grammys that she's seen. And that includes all the times that we would go way back in the day to the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium when the Grammys were there. So that was actually quite heartening because, my mom's not really into hip-hop. and this Grammys was I got to say, felt like one of the most diverse and inclusive that we've had in a long time, and my mom just loved it. So that was great. Oh, another little bit of information. I got my first shot on Saturday, the Pfizer shot. I get my second one on the 3rd of April. And thank goodness, Mom got hers, and I want to make sure that I'm not bringing anything to her. So I'm glad I finally got my shot. I'm not as old, obviously, but I'm old enough. I'm right into the old people's cell. They can get the shot. But I was just getting a little worried. Being healthy is no assurance that you're not going to get. I know that's a double negative. It's no assurance that you will avoid the virus just by being healthy. All sorts of healthy people get it because that's the way the flu and a cold happens. So I'm glad I got the vaccine. And I can't wait to get the second one. Now, I am not of the mind that, I am now suddenly free to do whatever I want without any protection. I don't need to wash my hands anymore. What? You always wash your hands. You always brush your teeth. And we're going to be wearing masks for quite some time. Just because Asian countries are wearing masks, because of SARS, doesn't mean that they're lesser humans. I know there's so much racism in this country that you can't really cite Asian nations as being an example of how we should behave because, look, they're Asian. Well, look, they've been wearing masks for air pollution before they were wearing masks to get, to protect themselves from SARS and now COVID. So maybe we ought to embrace the face mask as part of our wardrobe for some time to come, because I don't care what people think, I'm wearing my mask. And we should especially wear masks for, at least several months after our shots, just to be sure. You would think that the American ideology would be such that we would just want to be sure. But we've got all sorts of idiots out there saying it's about personal freedom. No, it's not. It's about public health. All right? Washing your hands is not about personal freedom. It's about public health. Wearing a seatbelt is not about personal freedom. It's about public health. How is that public health? Well, damn it. The rest of us got tired of all these idiots thinking that their personal freedom was such that they could get injured in an auto accident, then the rest of our insurance rates go up. Hey, that's not how it works in America. You start impacting other people's money, they want something done about it. Now that's personal freedom. Okay? You want us all to adhere to the magic of the market? How about you doing the same? Okay? Yeah, because I have been hearing arguments like, well, we don't want to wear seatbelts either. We don't want to wear helmets on our motorcycles either. Well, you know what? I don't want to pay for your goddamn medical expenses through my insurance premiums anymore either. All right? I want the personal freedom to not have to pay so high of insurance premiums. And I actually got to say, my insurance premiums have gone way down just before they're going to go back up for being old again. My insurance premiums went down because I'm old. Now they're going to go back up because I'm old. But I'm healthy. Got that going for me. Hey, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Because we actually do have a curated show. Well, at the top, Lindsey Graham was taken out by the Black Farmer Association head. That Graham must apologize for that racist comment about subsidies that have been kept from farmers of color for decades as reparations. And then it also beggars a question also. What's wrong with reparations? You racist. Yeah. On the rest of the menu, North Carolina police evacuated local businesses in Brevard after they found several incendiary devices near a Black Baptist church in a county building. IEDs. Uh-huh. After being routinely ignored by their departments, U.S. female firefighters are fighting discrimination with lawsuits because that's all they have left. And state governors are evading sunshine laws during the pandemic to keep records from the public. They'll use any excuse, won't they? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where London police face a backlash after beating the crap out of scores of women, mourning the death of a young London woman murdered by an off-duty London cop. Boy, they sure do protect their own, don't they? And international arms sales were flat from 2016 through 2020, the first time in more than a decade, though arms sales to the Middle East are up a quarter. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is, of course, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring patronage helps us pay our bills so that we can fly under the radar and continuing what we've been doing for the last 10 years, 24/7, 365. Yes, indeed. Nothing stops us. We hope that we're more reliable than the Postal Service, and with the joy and charge over there, I think we are. And we've been able to do so because of your generosity. You, if you're able to, send us the equivalent of an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month. We pool those funds with our funds and pay our bills. Isn't that amazing? And I got to tell you, these bills keep going up. They don't care about a pandemic or a person's stature within whether they have a media empire or not. They're going to continue raising those bills. but we still pay them because we have a civic duty to resist, well, these Nazis trying to take over the great experiment. We will not let it happen. And we're able to do so because of you, and we thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that and so much more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I, of course, post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookQuest. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really wherever podcasts can be found. Okay. Gunner the English Bulldog is hard at work at being the snoozing sous chef. He's snoozing away. Such a hard worker. We love him, though. Okay, this first offering comes out of the Associated Press by, it looks like, anonymous staff at the AP. Well, police in North Carolina evacuated local businesses yesterday, Sunday, after they found several, I'll repeat that, several suspected incendiary devices near a Baptist church, that just happens to be a black Baptist church, by the way, and a county building. Police in Brevard, a city of about 7,500 in western North Carolina, said they received a call about 10:30 in the morning for a report of the devices near the First Baptist Church of Brevard and the Transylvania County Community Services Building. Wow. They must think that the Transylvania Community Services Building there in that county is a bunch of bloodsuckers. Yeah, I went a long way for that one. When officers responded, they found several small devices that had not detonated. The area was cordoned off. Local establishments were evacuated as a precautionary measure, and there were no injuries. City Council member Geraldine Dinkins said she was saddened by the discovery of the devices in Brevard, which she called a close-knit community. Well, I would suggest you go to those anti-government types, and I bet you they're white. And you ask them, do you think the Transylvania County Community Building are filled with a bunch of bloodsuckers? And if they say yes, I would probably test them for bomb-making residue on their hands. This is just really an act of cowardice, and Brevard is better than that, she said. And police said they are working with the Transylvania County Sheriff's Office, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the ATF to investigate. No other information was immediately provided. Tom Foreman Jr. of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Ash Mondays. The highest-ranking female firefighter in Asheville, North Carolina, says she was repeatedly discriminated against because of her sex and fought to keep her job while battling breast cancer. The first female chief of a municipal fire department in the state says she briefly pondered suicide after years of sexual harassment. Joy Ponder and Susanna Schmidt-Williams are among numerous female firefighters in the U.S. who have filed lawsuits against their employers, alleging they were subjected to demeaning behavior that helped end their careers. Advocates say going to court is sometimes the only effective recourse in a field where women make up such a tiny part of the workforce. According to the National Fire Protection Association, 93,700 or 8% of U.S. firefighters were female in 2018, the last year for which data was available. Williams, who was fired in July of 2019, told the Associated Press that she was, quote, the subject of sexualized rumors and hostility in the form of insubordination by those who reported to me, end quote. Williams said Carborough town manager David Andrews overturned both her disciplinary and operational decisions, and for the latter, relied instead on the recommendations of men in the department who were lower ranked and had less experience in education. Well, that seems like that's fairly endemic. You know, J.D. Vance, yeah, the guy that wrote Hillbilly Elegy, has recommended that maybe we should get rid of the requirement that the officer corps in the military have a BA. They have to get a college degree before they can be an officer. And I would say that rather than lessening their educational level, maybe they need to increase it. All right? Not that it makes them better people, but it will make them more educated. I'll be damned if I have what? We have a problem with uneducated policemen. We don't need less education. We need more. And how about teaching people, men, that when you have a superior, you follow their orders. If you want a military structure, then you better start adhering to that structure. If your leader is a woman, you follow her orders. What is the problem here? Ponder, who resigned from her post as Asheville Fire Department Division Chief in September, said she faced years of harassment and gender discrimination from Chief Scott Burnett after she led outside research on the prevalence of post-traumatic stress disorder among city firefighters. Ponder filed her lawsuit in November and then an amended complaint last month. Williams filed her lawsuit in January, and both are still pending. Stephen Groves of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem's outspoken business-as-usual approach throughout the coronavirus pandemic has made her a darling of national conservatives and allowed her to hopscotch across the country as a fundraising force. But the public cannot see emails on how she made her decisions or how much state taxpayers are spending for her traveling security detail. Despite Noem's 2018 promise to throw open the doors of government, the South Dakota Governor's Office has denied requests for both records, citing broad exemptions to the state's Sunshine Law. Her state is among a dozen where Governor's Office routinely block access to executive records, keeping the public in the dark about decision-making and possible influence peddling by special interests. Things that are in the public interest are still being hidden from the public, said Jack Marsh, a former executive editor of the Argus Leader newspaper and co-founder of the nonprofit South Dakota Newswatch. He said South Dakota's open record laws are some of the weakest in the country and noted that there has been little advancement of transparency under Noem's administration other than a 2019 law that shields reporters from being forced to reveal sources. In most states, sunshine laws give the public insight into the governor's decisions. Since last year, governors across the country have provided thousands of pages of emails in response to requests filed by the Associated Press, revealing how some pushed economic interests ahead of public health guidance as they battle the pandemic. But Nome and governors from 5 other states, Arkansas, California, Massachusetts, Michigan, and New Jersey, have thwarted records requests by citing exemptions. Nome's administration has refused to disclose how much it costs to send state troopers with her as she travels the country campaigning for former President Trump and raising her own campaign cash. The governor's office has cited state law exempting security details from record requests and argued that providing the information would put lives in danger. No, it doesn't. Several GOP lawmakers pushed the governor's office to disclose its annual security costs to the legislature, but no, a fellow Republican pressured them to drop the matter. Oh, really? Do they put horses' heads on people's beds in South Dakota? Maybe. When the AP sought records detailing how businesses belonging to Nome's brothers received over $600,000 from a state pandemic grant pushed by the governor, they too were denied under the state's exemptions for disclosure because their lives would be endangered, Christy. Now in California, Newsom's office last year denied an AP request for communications showing how the Democratic governor made decisions related to the virus outbreak. California's exemptions dates to 1968, with legislation enacted under then-Governor Ronald Reagan that shielded all documents belonging to the governor's office. Lawmakers, newspapers, and open government advocates have pressed over the years to narrow exemptions, but after the Los Angeles Times sued in 1988 to get appointment calendars and other records that could show the governor's daily activities, the state Supreme Court ruled the public interest was better served by not disclosing the calendar. Today, Newsom does disclose his monthly calendars, as Jerry Brown did before him, but they come with caveats. Pointing to the earlier court decisions, Newsom's lawyers write that they will not disclose entries that reveal the deliberative process and note the calendars are an incomplete look at the governor's activities, because he does play tennis too, you know. Massachusetts exemptions can be traced to a 1997 ruling in a case seeking access to a questionnaire completed by the governor's nominee to the state's high court. The ruling denied the request to make the questionnaire public, while also finding that the state's public records law does not expressly include the legislature, the judicial branch, or the governor's office. In other words, we have sunshine law for the government, just not any part of the government. Okay, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a new Scientific American podcast series.
This is your Fast Track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research, and we help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, after a whole awful year of COVID, we're going to talk about what we did wrong and what we've learned to do right.
We'll also be correcting an idea that the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine is second-rate.
And giving you news about some recent developments in COVID medicines.
This is not a celebration kind of anniversary, but we're at the 1-year milestone of the pandemic.
This week is the 1-year anniversary of when the World Health Organization first called COVID a pandemic. This time last year, the world was going into lockdowns, borders were closing, and cities became ghost towns. Now we've lost more than 2.6 million people worldwide to this awful disease, including more than 500,000 in the US alone. I wrote a story about some of the biggest mistakes in the US pandemic response, from not taking the virus seriously, to confusing or inaccurate mask guidance, to failing to protect our most vulnerable people, whether it's the elderly, essential workers, or people of color. These mistakes cost us hundreds of thousands of lives.
It's been such a tragedy. Has it only been disaster after disaster?
Well, there were some successes too. Healthcare workers really stepped up to help treat people the best they could. Everyday people took the initiative to help flatten the curve by staying home and wearing masks. And perhaps most impressive of all, several highly effective vaccines were developed in record time, and they all protect against severe disease and death. And now millions of Americans are getting vaccinated every day across the country. In fact, we're already seeing dramatic declines in the numbers of elderly people who are hospitalized and dying from COVID in the US, which is at least in part due to the vaccines. So I've been reporting on this topic of COVID now for a year and living through it like all of you. And I've learned a great deal about this virus and about how we respond to it. And I've tried to distill some of those lessons in a story about the pandemic, which is on scientificamerican.com if you want to read it. Speaking of vaccines, Josh, not everyone is totally excited about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What's going on with that?
People are paying a lot of attention to one number from the vaccine trials, 23. Overall, the Moderna-Pfizer vaccines seem 23% more effective than the J&J one, which protects people at about 72%. So some people, like the mayor of Detroit last week, who at first passed on using J&J in his city, but then changed his mind, seem to think that J&J isn't as good. But here's why 23 is misleading. It's probably much smaller in real life. The first vaccines were tested early last year, when there wasn't a lot of virus around. The J&J vaccine was tested in late fall when there was a lot. A lot means, naturally, more people get sick. If Pfizer and Moderna were tested now, more people in those tests would get exposed, and the vaccine would show a smaller improvement than 23. Plus, we know J&J works against some of the new virus variants because it was tested after they appeared. And J&J prevented 100% of hospitalizations and deaths and 85% of severe illness. And that's what you want in a vaccine in the middle of a deadly pandemic, to keep you from needing an ambulance ride to the ICU.
What about drugs to treat you if you already have the disease? That's a different story, right? And sometimes a pretty frustrating one.
Yep. There are not a lot of approved drug options for COVID. It's been a year, and we've got the drug remdesivir and 2 forms of monoclonal antibodies that slow down the virus in your body. They work a bit, but the effects are not major. And there's the steroid dexamethasone, and that helps hospitalize patients who need oxygen or are on ventilators.
Well, that's disappointing. But do you know of anything new in the works?
Well, an NIH treatment panel recently approved another monoclonal antibody drug, tocilizumab, for hospitalized patients who are having real trouble breathing. The drug damps down inflammation. That's what's behind the breathing distress. But I talked with Lindsey Graham, an infectious disease doctor at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, who said that the drug only works on patients who also get dexamethasone. So you still need both. And he sounded a bit frustrated that there was not a clear benefit to the drug. Other researchers share this frustration. Some of them are calling on the Biden administration to start supporting medicine development the same way it supports vaccines. Biden did just sign an executive order telling the federal government to come up with a plan to test more medicines. That seems like a step in the right direction.
You are now up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Voter fraud myth fuels GOP drive to rewrite laws. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute, and that was a recent New York Times headline for the story widely reported. The Republicans countrywide are mounting extraordinary efforts to legislate voter suppression. Last November, there was record voter turnout across the United States and no fraud. Nevertheless, state legislatures across the country are pushing to enact laws that will make it much more difficult to vote by eliminating no-excuse absentee ballots and otherwise constructing numerous other obstacles to absentee voting, by minimizing early voting days and reducing the number of hours polls are open on Election Day, creating long lines, and effectively eliminating voting places in neighborhoods of color, and by closing popular voting places like college campuses and voting centers, and by ending automatic voter registration at motor vehicle offices, and by curtailing early voting on Sundays when many African Americans vote after church. The racism is palpable. The justification for this overt voter suppression is the big lie that the 2020 election somehow was stolen from Donald Trump, the remedy for which is to ensure that certain people, particularly people of color and other marginalized communities, don't vote again. The consequences of a successful legislative push for voter suppression would be dire. As a Democratic state senator in Iowa summarized, on this path, we're not going to have a working democracy. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
There's a white oak tree in Athens, Georgia, that is not owned by anyone. It's an autonomous entity known as the tree that owns itself. Around 1820, the owner of the property wrote a formal deed proclaiming, "In consideration of the great love I bear this tree and the great desire I have for its protection for all time, I convey entire possession of itself and all land within 8 feet of the tree on all sides." Age finally took its toll, though, and a 1942 windstorm downed the tree. Yet its autonomy lives on. Residents took a seedling from the original and planted it in the same spot, and that offspring is still there, known as the son of the tree that owns itself. What if all trees and other natural ecosystems had a legal right to exist, thrive, evolve, and regenerate? This concept of nature existing in its own right as living entities is the essence of a rapidly spreading rights of nature movement. All across our country and around the world, people wake up to find that faraway financial elites have come in by stealth, using legalistic ruses to poison local water, strip forests and fields, defile the air, and otherwise destroy our natural surroundings. But what if the law was balanced to let those natural surroundings have their own say and redress the harm done to them? Just as corporations have lawyers, rivers, forests, etc. could be provided with legal counsel to sue corporations and governments that mindlessly contaminate and even kill them. This idea is taking hold. Last November, a whopping 89% of voters in Orange County, Florida, fed up with decades of industrial pollution of their waterways, shouted yes to a Rights of Nature initiative. This is Jim Hightower saying, to learn more, go to Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, CELDF.org.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1940. That was the day that Grapes of Wrath opened in movie theaters. Adapted from John Steinbeck's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, John Ford directed the film, which starred Henry Ford as Tom Joad. pleased with the adaptation, Steinbeck stated, quote, "It pulled no punches and was in fact harsher than the book. It is considered one of the greatest films of all time. Like the book, the film focused on the plight of poor white tenant farmers fleeing Oklahoma for a better life in California. The Jodes were devastated by Dust Bowl conditions, bank foreclosures, and mechanization during the Great Depression. They joined thousands of other families heading west on Route 66 to advertised farm jobs that never materialized. The family gets stuck in New Deal resettlement administration camps and ends up on both sides of agricultural worker struggles. They narrowly escape starvation and state police. At the time of its release, The Grapes of Wrath was critically acclaimed for its depiction of the poor, but the Associated Farmers of California condemned it as communist propaganda. Steinbeck visited resettlement camps as part of his research. Union organizing and police violence unfolded during the Salinas lettuce strike, which began as he wrote. Woody Guthrie's classic Ballad of Tom Jones soon followed the movie's release. Recent critics contend that Agricultural Adjustment Administration policies were more to blame than banks. Others assert it presents a sympathetic portrait of white tenant farmers at the expense of black sharecroppers. Historian Eric Loomis adds that Steinbeck and Ford both disappear the plight of non-white exploited labor already in California. Nonetheless, the film and movie both provide a deep look into the misery created by the Great Depression. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting only a high in the mid-40s. Looks like we'll have a few scattered snow flurries and snow showers this morning, becoming partly cloudy later. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour and might be getting a bit of piling up of snow. A few clouds overnight, lows in the mid-20s. Winds will be light and variable, though, and highs tomorrow about 55. With some clouds in the morning, giving way to mainly sunny skies in the afternoon, winds remaining light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus. Now, this is not the updated total from the weekend. This is only from late Friday, after Friday's show. We have now spiked, and I only am chuckling because it's gallows humor. This is terrible. We have now spiked to 8,734, and we have 2 more confirmed deceased. So 8,734, that was up from 8,600 something. And we only had 118 late Thursday, and now we have 120. Now, these numbers are going to increase when we get the final totals by late Tuesday. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good, though it's pretty high at 40 parts per million, just about ready to go into the moderate range. And that daytime UV index is moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.16 inches. Visibility currently is up to 9 miles, though that should decrease in about an hour here. And relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 50 degrees with a rain shower. Paris is 51 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 60 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 40 degrees with fog. Kabul is 50 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 52 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 62 and fair. San Francisco, California is 43 degrees and partly cloudy with a heavy wind advisory. Gale-force winds on the bay. Small craft advisory. Do take care. And New York, New York is a very icy cold 27 degrees Fahrenheit, but wow, is it sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. First amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays is brought to us by Ben McCory and William James of Reuters. London police faced a backlash from the public on Sunday yesterday and an official inquiry into their actions after using heavy-handed tactics to break up an outdoor vigil for a woman whose killer is a police officer. The disappearance of Sarah Everard, age 33, as she walked home on the evening of March 3rd, has provoked a huge outpouring of grief and dismay in Britain at the failure of police and wider society to tackle violence against women. Police had denied permission for a vigil on Saturday evening at London's Clapham Common, near where Everard was last seen alive, citing regulations aimed at preventing the spread of the coronavirus. But hundreds of people, mostly women, gathered peacefully at the park in defiance of the ban to pay their respects throughout Saturday, including Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge. Later on Saturday, dozens of police officers marched into the crowd to shouts of "Shame on you." Scuffles broke out, and officers dragged women away from the scene and beat the crap out of them. Last night, people were very, very upset. And there was a great deal of emotion, completely understandably, and the police, being as they are operationally independent, will be having to explain that to the Home Secretary. Safeguarding Minister Victoria Atkins told Sky News. London Police Chief Cressida Dick backed her officers and said that they needed to make a very difficult judgment. We're still in a pandemic. Unlawful gatherings are unlawful gatherings. Officers have to take action if people are putting themselves massively at risk. Asked if she was considering resigning, she said, "I am not." Home Secretary Priti Patel, the minister in charge of policing, described footage of the incident as upsetting. Her office said she had ordered an independent inquiry after an initial report left some questions unanswered.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. International deliveries of arms were flat in the period of 2016 to 2020, ending more than a decade of increases. The United States, France, and Germany, three of the world's biggest exporters, increased deliveries, but falls in exports from Russia and China offset the rise. It was the first time since 2001 to 2005 that the volume of deliveries of major arms between countries, an indicator of demand, did not increase from the previous 5-year period. While the pandemic has shut down economies across the world and pushed many countries into deep recessions, it's still too early to tell whether the slowdown in arms delivery was likely to continue. The United Arab Emirates, for example, recently signed an agreement with the U.S. to purchase 50 F-35 jets and up to 18 armed drones as part of a $23 billion package. Now, Middle Eastern countries accounted for the biggest increase in arms exports, up 25% in 2016 to 2020 from 2011 to 2015. Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest arms exporter, increased its arms exports by 61% and Qatar by 361%. Asia and Oceania were the largest importing regions for major arms. And for many states in Asia and Oceania, a growing perception of China as a threat is the main driver for arms imports. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.